Hey guys, it's Danny, welcome to my channel. Another string review, still searching for the best string for the Yonex Ezone 98. I playtested Laxilon Alu Power Soft, Yonex Polytour Pro, Yonex Polytour Spin, Solinco Turbite Soft 130, Technifiber Razor Soft 130. Now testing Babolat RPM Blast 130 gauge. Thicker string, but maybe more popular on the ATP level. I am already familiar with this string. I have playtested it in the Pure Aero 98, Dunlop FX 500 Tour, which in some ways is very similar in its DNA to the Ezone 98. I use it in Angel Tees 95, 1619, and probably a couple more rackets I would find. I was quite excited to this playtest because when I used RPM Blast 130 in a Dunlop FX 500 Tour, I was shocked like how easy it is to control the ball. Both rackets, Ezone 98 and Dunlop FX 500 Tour, have relatively low swing wave, low static wave. Of course, I added some mass to the Ezone 98, and I also added some mass to the Dunlop. RPM Blast is a relatively stiff string, a bit muted. It's not like a boardy, stiff, wiry string. It has some pocketing effect. It has some response. It is a low-powered string, but doesn't feel like a low-powered string. For example, Headlink's Tour feels more like a low-powered string. Link's Tour feels like a stiffer string, less powered string. RPM Blast, despite having the lap numbers as a stiffer string, the feel is still there in my opinion, but the response is definitely in this control-oriented segment of strings. So yeah, if we want to compare familiar strings, similar strings to RPM Blast, we would have to put out Link's Tour 130, maybe Turbite, but not soft, the regular one, 130, Technifiber Razor Soft 130. From all the strings that I mentioned in this line, I think RPM Blast has a bit more of this rubbery effect. In a way reminds me of Yonex Polytour Force. Polytour Force is a round string. This is a shaped string. From my memory it is 8-sided, so it has some edges, but the edges aren't as pronounced, so the edges are very gentle, and in general the launch angle isn't like very up and down. It is predictable, closer to round strings. In general, it is a good thing. I don't like when the string is biting into the ball very hard because we are losing a sense of control of the launch angle. In my opinion, strings should have the freedom to move. More edgy string tend to be more locked and feel actually as a stiffer string. This one, yeah, it breathes a bit more, which is a good thing. I've mentioned the waves of Ezone and Dunlop because in general RPM Blast 130 is quite heavy, and it adds up to the static wave, it adds up to the swing wave. I didn't measure the specs before and after, but to me it feels like the bump was noticeable. I didn't add any mass to the top of the racket, and the swing wave came up really high, which kind of makes sense. You can use a modern racket with a very light specs and put RPM Blast 130 to balance out the overall feel of the swing, make it more smooth. I must be honest, this one felt very demanding, but I think it actually comes with the Ezone 98 in stock form. Like, to me, Ezone, it doesn't cut through the air as easy as some standard rackets. By standard I mean standard head shapes. Isometric shapes, for some reason they feel a bit more bulky. Maybe it comes down to the thickness of the beam as well. For me, Ezone 98 in stock form feels actually heavy. This one pushed it even further, even though I am adding mass to the handle to make the leverage a bit easier, to whip around the racket, to make the wrist a bit more 3, I was struggling with RPM Blast 130. It felt like a very demanding racket, and string overall felt also very demanding. It was very hard to bend the string. If you follow the series of my search for the perfect Ezone 98 string, you know that I am looking a bit for this pocketing, a bit more of this free spin potential. This one killed it completely. I was really fighting against the racket, and that made spin potential even worse. Now when I pick out the other racket with Yonex Polytour Spin, I feel like I'm at home, or at least closer to what I'm looking for. So with all the next playtests, I'm actually calibrating my final thoughts about the Ezone and what string might be the best for it. So when I used RPM Blast in Ezone, Dunlop FX500 Tour, Pure Aero 98, actually, with all the rackets, I felt like this string is more for physical players that want to explode, that they are aggressive players, they want to attack, and RPM Blast is kind of there to put a compressor on their output, max output, and when they pick the hot levels, the RPM Blast is squeezing it slightly down. You get the benefits of your explosiveness, and RPM Blast gives you confidence to search for this aggressiveness. Me, more as a counter puncher, where I want to guide the ball and maybe redirect the pace. I think I need something more responsive, and still I am looking for a bit more spin potential so I can accelerate and get a bit more out of the string. So for example, from all the strings I playtested in the Ezone 98, Laxion Alu Power Soft, yeah, more spin potential. Yonex Polytour Pro, similar spin potential, so not the best. We have Yonex Polytour Spin, definitely more spin potential. Solinco Turbite Soft, still. And interesting thing is I didn't struggle with the Solinco Turbite Soft 130 physically as with the RPM Blast 130. So yeah, that's interesting. Turbite Soft was giving me more spin, more pocketing, more power, more forgiveness, and yeah, it felt overall as a softer string. So yeah, maybe that's the answer why I felt it more as a user-friendly string. We have Technifiber Razor Soft 130. Oh, this is, yeah, they felt quite similar actually, and the spin potential is also quite similar. Razor Soft 130, not many players are using it, so I felt there is no story to tell, that's why I didn't make a video there. RPM Blast 130, definitely a more popular string, but the output I was getting out of both strings was very similar, and the input that I had to give to the ball yeah, was also quite similar. Maybe a tiny bit more user-friendly was the Razor Soft 130. RPM Blast, more control, more confidence to hit out, but definitely harder to accelerate the racket. So RPM Blast 130, not a good match for the Ezone 98. Maybe RPM Blast 125 would be a better choice. So far, the most exciting strings in the Ezone 98 were Alu Power Soft and Yonex Poly Tour Spin. I want to try Solinco Mach 10, not sure if I want to go with 125 or 130 gauge. Here I am hesitating because RPM Blast was that demanding, but I really liked Mach 10 130 in Solinco Whiteout 98 1619, which in general is even more contra-oriented than the Ezone 98. So in general, if we follow the on-paper reviews, Ezone 98 should be an easier racket to generate power than with the whiteout. So Mach 10 130 work in a more contra-oriented racket. why wouldn't it work in the more powerful racket? I want to try Grapplesnake M8 and yeah, maybe Laxalon Alu Power Rough, but I'm holding it for the special occasion, not sure if the Ezone 98 is worth it. I wanted to try Laxilon Original 130, but in my head, Original is kinda RPM Blast 130 1.0. Like in the past, every Spanish player was using Laxilon Original, and then Babolat RPM Blast came to the courts, and every Spanish player moved over to RPM Blast. Nadal is one of them. So yeah, with RPM Blast being so demanding in the Ezone 98, I'm hesitating if I even want to try Laxilon Original, even though I like the string really much. So that's it for this review. Yeah, not a good recommendation, RPM Blast 130 in the Ezone 98. I would put RPM Blast in a more spinny racket, maybe Vicor 98, Purer 98, 100s. Ezone 100 probably would take it better. Overall, a spinny racket I think would take it well. I am still thinking about the Dunlop FX500 Tour because in general Ezone 98 and Dunlop are like neighbors fighting each other, and I really like RPM Blast in the Dunlop. I'm wondering what happened there. And I think that's it for this review. Thank you for watching, make sure to subscribe and see you soon. Bye bye.